The cold that morning was the kind that cut through layers of clothing and settled deep into the bones, the kind that made even the strongest hearts feel small. Snow drifted lazily through the gray sky as cars rushed past the corner of a quiet Chicago street, their headlights blurring in the early dawn. On the sidewalk stood a woman with trembling hands, clutching a basket of wilting flowers, her breath fogging the air as two small boys pressed close to her sides. Hannah Mercer had been awake since before sunrise, her boots worn thin, her coat barely holding warmth, and yet she stood there anyway, because hunger didn't wait for better weather and rent didn't care about frozen fingers. She had lost everything slowly, one misfortune at a time, until selling flowers in the cold became her only way to survive, with her twin sons, Caleb and Noah, clinging to her for warmth and hope. Before this story continues, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you believe kindness still exists in this world and that second chances can change lives. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. Hannah had once lived a quiet, honest life in a small Ohio town, married to a hard-working man who promised her safety and love. But life shifted without warning when illness took him away and hospital bills swallowed every dollar they had. She sold their furniture, then their car, then finally the house where she had dreamed of raising her children. With nowhere else to go, she packed what little remained and moved to the city, believing opportunity lived there. Instead, she found endless rejection, rising rent, and nights spent awake calculating how to stretch a few dollars into meals. The twins were only 6, their jackets too thin for winter, their shoes scuffed at the toes, but they never complained. They stood quietly beside her every morning as she offered flowers to passing strangers, their small hands numb, their eyes hopeful that someone might stop. That morning was especially cruel. The wind howled between buildings, biting at exposed skin, and snow soaked through Hannah's gloves. Few people even looked her way. Most hurried past, wrapped in expensive coats, eyes fixed ahead as if stopping would mean catching her misfortune. The twins tried to smile at each passerby, but their lips trembled, their stomachs empty since the night before. Hannah's heart ached with guilt as she watched them shiver, wondering how long she could keep pretending things would get better. Every step that passed without slowing felt like another door closing. Then, just as despair began to settle in fully, a sleek black car rolled to a stop near the curb. It was the kind of vehicle Hannah had only seen in magazines, polished and powerful, completely out of place on that worn street. The engine hummed quietly as the driver's window lowered. Inside sat a man in his early 40s, his expression calm yet searching, his eyes drawn not to the flowers but to the children huddled in the cold. His name was Jonathan Reed, a self-made billionaire who had built his fortune from nothing, a man who usually lived behind tinted glass and closed doors. That morning, something had urged him to take a different route, something he couldn't explain. Jonathan watched as Hannah tried to shield the boys from the wind, her own hands turning red as she held out a small bouquet. He saw pride in her posture, exhaustion in her face, and a quiet dignity that stopped him cold. Memories surfaced of his own childhood, of nights when his mother skipped meals so he could eat, of winters when hope felt just as fragile. Without hesitation, he stepped out of the car, the cold biting through his tailored coat, and walked toward them. What happened next didn't feel dramatic or loud. There were no grand gestures, no crowds gathering. Just a moment of human connection on a frozen sidewalk. Jonathan listened as Hannah explained her situation with trembling honesty, never begging, never asking for pity. He noticed how the boys held her hands, how their trust in her remained unbroken despite everything. Something shifted inside him then. He didn't see poverty, he saw strength. He didn't see charity, he saw responsibility. Within minutes, everything changed. Jonathan arranged warm food for the twins, a safe place to stay, and medical care to make sure they were healthy. But more than that, he offered Hannah dignity. He connected her with a small business owner who needed help, paid her first months of rent, and ensured the boys could return to school. There were no cameras, no publicity, just quiet action driven by empathy. As he walked away, he left behind more than money. He left behind hope, the kind that grows slowly but lasts. Before the ending, take a moment to comment below where you're watching from and whether this story reminded you that kindness still exists in unexpected places. Weeks later, the corner where Hannah once stood selling flowers was empty, not because she had disappeared, but because she no longer needed to be there. She now worked mornings at a neighborhood shop, her hands warm, her heart lighter. Caleb and Noah laughed more, slept better, and dreamed again. And sometimes, when the snow fell softly outside their small apartment window, Hannah would hold her sons close and remember the stranger who stopped when the world kept moving. Not because he was rich, but because he chose to see them. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps spread stories of hope, compassion, and second chances to people who need them most. Sometimes, all it takes to change a life is one moment of kindness, and the courage to act on it.